Good evening. Let your body go a little heavy. Feel the weight of wherever you are resting, the pillow behind your head, the blanket settling over you, the quiet all around. There is nothing you need to do tonight. Nothing to finish, nothing to fix, nothing to plan. You are here. That is enough. Tonight, we are going to talk about something quietly useful. Something that, if you let it settle into you, can remove a particular kind of worry from your life. Not by magic, by something simpler than magic. We are going to talk about saving for the things you already know are coming. Let your eyes close if they have not already. Let your breathing slow just a little. We are in no hurry here. The idea will arrive gently, and you do not need to hold onto every word. Just let them settle over you the way a soft rain settles over a garden. Unhurried, quiet. We begin. There is an old phrase in the world of accounting: sinking fund. It sounds a little heavy, perhaps. A little formal and industrial, like something from a ledger book in a dim office 100 years ago. But the idea underneath the phrase is one of the gentlest ideas in all of personal finance. A sinking fund is simply a small pile of money you build up ahead of time for a cost you already know is coming. That is all it is. Nothing complicated, nothing to memorize tonight. The word sinking comes from the old idea of steadily paying something down, reducing a debt, letting a number slowly sink toward zero. But for our purposes tonight, you can think of it in the opposite direction. The fund is rising slowly, filling up like water in a basin. You add a little each month, and the level climbs, and when the time comes, there is enough. You know, at some point, you will want to celebrate a holiday. You know your car will eventually need a repair. You know there will be birthdays and anniversaries and moments when someone you love deserves a gift. These things are not surprises. You know they are coming. A sinking fund is simply the quiet habit of preparing for them before they arrive. Nothing more, nothing less. A small, steady, deliberate act of preparation. There is a close cousin to the sinking fund that you may already know about: the emergency fund. These two ideas are related, but they are not the same, and it is worth holding them gently apart. An emergency fund is for the truly unknown. The job loss that arrives without warning. The health event that no calendar could have predicted. The roof damaged overnight in an unexpected storm. These are real surprises, the things that could not reasonably have been foreseen. The sinking fund is for a different category entirely. The things you knew were coming, or could reasonably have expected. The things that were never really surprises, just costs you had not yet prepared for. When we treat known costs as emergencies, when we pull from the emergency fund every time a predictable expense arrives, we slowly empty the fund that was meant for true unknowns. Sinking funds protect the emergency fund by taking care of everything that was actually predictable. They let each fund do its proper job. And when the real emergency arrives, the true unknown, you face it with resources, with a fund that has not been slowly drained by car services and holiday travel. That is a form of resilience, quiet, built over months, ready when needed. Let me say something gently honest. Most of the things we call unexpected expenses are not really unexpected at all. The car needing new tires, you knew it would eventually. Tires wear down. That is just what tires do slowly over miles. The boiler that needs servicing in the winter, you knew that too. Boilers have annual schedules. They have parts that age. The flights home for the holidays, the new school year supplies for the children, the dental checkup in the spring, the insurance renewal in the autumn. None of these arrived without warning. They arrive on a schedule, more or less. A predictable rhythm. A calendar you could have consulted. But often, we do not consult it. We live in the present month, the present week, the present day. And the future, with its known costs, stays at the edge of attention, there but unexamined. And so when these costs arrive, we feel surprised. We feel caught out. There is a small scramble. Maybe we dip into savings that were meant for something else. Maybe we put the cost on a credit card and deal with it later in some quieter month. Maybe we simply feel, for a week or two, that familiar low-level money stress, that quiet hum at the back of the mind that says, I should have been more prepared. That hum is not a character flaw. It is just the gap between knowing something is coming and actually planning for it. The sinking fund closes that gap. says gently, you can prepare. You can do it quietly, slowly, well in advance. And the arrival of these costs, the ones that used to feel like interruptions, becomes, over time, completely calm. You expected this. You saved for this. Here it is. And here is the money to meet it. Here is a quiet realization that often surprises people when they sit down and think carefully about their year. There are more known costs than they first assumed. Not just the obvious ones, not just the holidays and the car. There is the professional membership that renews every spring, the annual home or renter's insurance, the dentist visit you have been putting off, the vet's annual checkup for the dog, the eye examination you schedule every 2 years, the children's sports fees at the start of the school year, the friend's wedding in June that you have known about since last autumn. None of these are secrets. You knew about most of them in some vague way. But because they arrive once a year, or once every 2 years, they do not feel like part of the regular flow. They feel like interruptions, like outside forces arriving uninvited. The sinking fund approach asks you to look ahead, not far ahead, just 12 months or so. Take a quiet moment, not tonight, but sometime soon, and ask yourself, what do I know is coming? Give each one a rough cost and a rough date. The list may be longer than you expected, but rather than making you anxious, that list can become a plan. Here is how the idea works in practice. And it really is simple enough to hold in your mind tonight without any effort. Think of something you know you will spend money on in the next 12 months. A holiday, a birthday gift, a car service, a yearly renewal of some kind. It does not matter what, just one thing that you know is coming. Now think of what that cost is likely to be. A rough number. It does not need to be exact. An honest estimate is enough. Divide that number by 12, or by however many months remain until the cost arrives. That is the amount you set aside each month. That is all the arithmetic this approach requires. If you know you tend to spend around $600 on holiday travel in December, you set aside $50 each month. Quietly, in a small, separate place, a separate savings pocket, a labeled envelope, anywhere it will not be confused with your daily spending. By the time December arrives, the money is sitting there, waiting, calm, ready. You do not scramble. You do not stress. You do not look at the credit card statement in January with that particular sinking feeling. You simply spend what you have already saved. You use money that was always meant for this. The holiday becomes something you prepared for, rather than something that happened to you. That is a different feeling entirely. It is the quiet feeling of being someone who is gently, softly in control, not rigid, not anxious, just ready. And here is the restful part. The amounts can be genuinely, surprisingly small. Even a modest amount set aside each month from January becomes a real cushion by December. Not a fortune, but a true cushion. One that means December does not require borrowing anything. One that means the unexpected car cost does not mean an uncomfortably tight few weeks. You are not solving the problem on the day it arrives. You are dissolving it quietly, gradually, across the months before it comes. Until by the time it arrives, there is almost nothing left to solve. The cost has not changed. What you owe is still the same number, but the shape of how you meet it is entirely different. You arrive at it having already carried it, a little at a time, across many months. There was no single heavy moment, just a long, light, manageable series of small ones. That is the geometry of this. Not a lump, a spreading, a thinning out across time, until what once felt heavy feels almost weightless. Some people find it helpful to think of sinking funds as jars. Not literal jars, necessarily, though some people do use literal jars, or small envelopes, or separate savings accounts with labels, and find it surprisingly satisfying. The physical act of sorting the money gives it clarity. But even just the mental image is useful. Each jar has a name. One jar says car. One jar says holidays. One jar says gifts. One jar says home. One jar says medical. Each month, a little goes into each jar. Not a dramatic amount, just a little, consistent, steady. And over time, each jar fills, slowly, without ceremony. When something needs paying for the car tire, the winter celebration, the birthday dinner, the leaky tap, you reach into the right jar. The money is there. It has been quietly filling for months. You do not need to rob one jar to fill another. You do not need to feel guilty for spending, because the spending was planned. You put that money there specifically so you could spend it on this when this arrived. There is a kind of permission in that, a lightness. You saved it for this purpose. Now you are using it for this purpose. That is just the plan, unfolding gently, exactly as you intended. And when the jar is empty, you begin refilling it quietly in the months that follow. The rhythm continues. The jar is never accusatory. It is never a source of shame. It is just a small, patient container, filling, emptying, filling again, keeping pace with the known rhythms of your year. Most people find that a small number of broad funds covers most of what they need. The categories do not need to be perfectly precise or philosophically watertight. They just need to be honest about what you already know is coming. And the act of naming them, giving each fund a label, a purpose, a little identity, is itself a quiet act of intention. You are looking at the future with clear eyes and saying, I see you. I know you are on your way, and I am going to be ready. The name matters more than you might expect. A fund called Holiday feels different than an undifferentiated savings account. A fund called Car reminds you, every time you look at it, what the money is protecting you from. The name carries the intention forward, month after month, even when you are not actively thinking about it. Name the jars. Let them hold the purpose on your behalf. When you build a sinking fund, you are not only saving money, you are buying something less tangible, but in some ways more valuable. You are buying the absence of a particular kind of dread. You may know the feeling. It is November. The holidays are approaching. You start doing quiet calculations in your head, barely consciously, just a background hum. How much will this cost this year? Can I afford good gifts? Will the bill in January be manageable? That calculating feeling, that undercurrent of low-level financial stress that arrives with the season. A sinking fund dissolves it. Because the money is already there. You saved it in March. You added to it in May. You let it sit in August without touching it, little by little, patiently, without fuss. November arrives, and you feel quiet. The gifts, the travel, the celebration, they are not a financial event anymore. They are just life, just warmth, just the ordinary pleasure of the season, unclouded by worry. That is what you are actually buying. A quiet November. And not only November. A quiet September when the school year begins. A quiet spring when the car needs its check. A quiet summer when the annual insurance renewal arrives. The peace comes month by month as each prepared-for event passes without drama. As each jar does its job, and the expense that might once have caused a scramble simply happens and is met and is done. That accumulation of quiet moments is not nothing. It adds up the way anything steady adds up into a life that feels financially, at least, a little more in order, a little more yours. Financial stress is one of the quieter, more persistent weights on human well-being. It does not always announce itself dramatically. It appears instead in the small thoughts that surface at 2 a.m. when everything else is still. In the slight edge that enters conversations about money. In the way a Saturday afternoon feels when you know there is a cost coming that you are not quite ready for. Reducing that stress does not require becoming wealthy. It does not require a transformation of income or a windfall or a promotion. It requires, mostly, a small rearrangement of how you think about time. When you look at a known cost approaching, and you begin slowly, gently, to prepare for it, you do something powerful in a very quiet way. You move from reacting to arranging, from waiting to deciding. And the body knows the difference between those two positions. Let us stay for a while with the idea of maintenance. Cars, homes, appliances, anything mechanical or structural in your life. These things have lifespans. They wear down over time. They need tending periodically to keep working. And eventually, some of them need replacing. There is a certain peace in accepting this, not with resignation, but with calm understanding. The boiler does not break to inconvenience you. The car tire does not deflate out of malice. These are simply the ordinary processes of the physical world. Materials wear, parts fatigue. Time moves through things and changes them. Maintenance is not a punishment. It is just the cost of using something over the course of its life. When you know this, truly know it, in a settled way, you can plan for it. A home maintenance fund is one of the most quietly powerful things a homeowner can build. Each month, a small amount goes in, not earmarked for anything specific, just there, waiting for whatever the house needs next. The year the boiler needs replacing, the money is there. Not all of it, perhaps, but some of it, enough to soften the cost. The year the fence needs fixing, the money is there. The year nothing breaks at all, the money simply stays. It grows a little. It waits for next year. And you are not sitting in the winter months, hoping nothing goes wrong. You have made a small peace with the likelihood that something will go wrong eventually. Not in a worried way, in a practical, prepared way. And because you have prepared, when the call comes from the plumber or the electrician, you feel not panicked, not trapped, just inconvenienced, which is all it ever should be. The repair gets done. The jar refills slowly over the following months. Life continues, undramatically, quietly. That undrama is exactly the goal. The same is true of the car. You may not know when it will need something, but you know it will. The car that has served you for several years has earned the right to some attention eventually. A tire, a brake pad, a belt, an oil seal. These things come with use. When the call comes from the garage, you want to be able to say, yes, go ahead. Not because money is no object, but because you have been quietly saving for this eventuality. For months, for years, perhaps. And then the repair happens, and the jar refills, and you move on. There is also something worth noticing about the relationship this creates with the things you own. When you have a fund for the car, you stop dreading it. The car is no longer a source of anxiety, a machine that might one day ambush you. It becomes something you are in an honest, practical relationship with. You know what it costs to run. You save accordingly. You meet its needs without drama. That is not a small thing. It is a shift in how you stand in relation to your own life. The holidays, whatever form they take in your life, carry emotional weight. There is warmth in them, the gathering of people, the lights, the food, the tradition, the anticipation. Something in them reaches back to earlier parts of our lives, to memory and feeling. And yet, for many people, threaded through that warmth is a low current of financial anxiety. Can I afford gifts for everyone this year? Is this too much? Not enough? What will January look like when the credit card statement arrives? That questioning undercurrent present even in the most joyful moments. It takes something from the season. Not everything, but something. The holiday sinking fund is one of the most liberating things you can build, precisely because of that. It separates the financial preparation from the emotional experience. The preparation happens in the quiet months before, in March, in June, in September. A little goes into the jar, steadily, without drama. And then when the season arrives, when you are choosing gifts, booking travel, planning the gathering, the money is already there, already saved, already waiting. You choose a gift for someone you love, and you pay for it with money that was always meant for this. There is no guilt in it, no internal calculation about whether you can afford it. Just the simple, uncomplicated pleasure of generosity. The holiday becomes what it was always meant to be. Just time with the people who matter to you. Just the ordinary warmth of the season, from which all of the financial worry has been gently removed. You did that with patience and with small, consistent amounts across the months before. And January arrives without dread. The credit card is paid in full, or nearly. The new year begins without the weight of a bill that arrived at the worst possible time. That too is a gift. The gift you give yourself quietly over the months before. There is something else the holiday fund does. It sets a natural, honest limit. When the fund is your constraint, rather than a credit card with room left on it, you spend what you have genuinely prepared for. And this often brings a quiet relief. You do not have to decide in the moment whether to spend more. The decision was made months ago in the form of a savings target. You saved for this amount, and this amount is what the holiday costs. No more, no less. A honest, prepared, deliberate season. One you planned for and can look back on with something like satisfaction. The first year of building sinking funds is not always the smoothest. If you begin in February and the car needs servicing in May, you will only have 3 months of contributions in that jar. It may not cover the full cost. That is all right. You will do better than if you had no jar at all. You will have something, and you will feel the difference. The following year is easier. The jar begins the year with more in it because you continued adding after the expense. The third year, easier still. And over time, This is the part that is harder to describe than to feel. The financial texture of your life begins to change. You stop reacting to expenses. You start expecting them. That shift from responding to anticipating is one of the quietest, most significant transformations in personal finance. It does not announce itself. There is no single dramatic moment of arrival. It simply happens gradually as the sinking funds do their work, month after month. One day you realize that a bill has arrived and you feel nothing. Not dread, not scrambling, just mild attention. You know where the money is. You transfer it. The bill is paid. It happened and it is done. Completely undramatic. That undrama is the measure of success. It is not exciting. But in personal finance, the things that are exciting are often the things that do not last. The bold maneuver, the dramatic turnaround, the risky move that paid off this time. The sinking fund is not exciting. It is steady. It is quiet. And because it is steady and quiet, it keeps working year after year, adding up into something substantial. Not just financially, but emotionally. Into a life that has a little less money stress in it. A little more room to breathe. Sometimes the jar will not be full when you need it. Sometimes you will have a month where the contribution is smaller than planned or does not happen at all. Life moves in irregular ways. Income varies. Unexpected demands arrive. Sometimes the cost will be higher than you estimated. The repair turns out to be more involved. The holiday was more expensive than last year. The jar will not quite cover it. That is fine. It is all still fine. The point is not perfection. The point is direction. A jar that is 3/4 full when you need it is still 3/4 of the problem solved. A year of consistent saving, even if some months were smaller than intended, is still a year of building. A year of practicing a habit. And the habit, over time, becomes a part of how you live. It is no longer something you do consciously and deliberately. It is simply how your finances work. The contributions move automatically. The jars fill without you watching them. The costs arrive and are met. You stop thinking about it as a technique. It just becomes how things are. That is when personal finance has truly settled into your life. Not as a discipline you maintain, as a rhythm you inhabit. Be patient with yourself in this. Personal finance is not a test. There is no final score. It is a long, slow practice. And like any practice, the early stages are the uncertain ones. The ones where the results are not yet fully visible. The later stages feel different, more natural, less effortful. What matters is that you start and that you continue. You have been thinking about money tonight, gently, without urgency. The idea you have been sitting with is a simple one. Save a little each month for the things you already know are coming. That is all. You do not need to do anything with this tonight. There is nothing to act on right now. No decisions to make, no accounts to open, no sums to calculate. Tonight, the only task is to rest. Let the idea settle in you the way water settles slowly into soil, without effort, without forcing. Just resting there, waiting quietly to become useful when the time is right. Tomorrow or sometime next week, or whenever the thought returns to you, that is when you might begin, with one jar, one cost, one small, steady amount set aside somewhere. It will not be confused with daily spending. That first step is all it takes to begin. One jar, one name on the jar, one small contribution. And from there it grows, month by month, jar by jar, until the year ahead feels not overwhelming, not full of financial uncertainty, but mapped, knowable, prepared for. The costs that are coming are not secrets. You know most of them, and now you know how to meet them. Quietly, gently, a little at a time. That is enough. Let your breathing slow. Let the thoughts grow quieter now, like a river settling in the evening. The year ahead is manageable. The things that are coming can be saved for, and you will be ready, not frantically, not at the last moment, but calmly, steadily, with the quiet confidence of someone who planned ahead. You are already the kind of person who thinks about these things. The rest follows naturally. Sleep well